Homework 7 is operations on functions and compositions of functions. So operations mean add, subtract, multiply, and divide. You can do that with just about any function that you've got. So let's take a look at number 1. So f minus g of x, that means you take function f and subtract function g. So I would make sure that whenever you set up one of the functions that anything that you sub in is always in parentheses. So like this. So take all of function f, like that, minus all of function g. So this operation is just matching this operation in the middle. So this means function f minus function g. This has nothing to do with like multiplying by an x, nothing like that. This is just function notation. Whatever's in parentheses tells you what the variable is. So this is plain and simple, just telling you that there is an x in the equation, versus something like this, where it tells you that you're supposed to be plugging something into the equations. This just tells you leave the x in the equation and you don't plug anything in. All right, so this combined like terms, be super careful with the fact that you have subtraction for both of these terms. So you're subtracting the 1 and you're subtracting the negative 6x, which means you actually end up adding 6x. So 2x squared minus, there's nothing over here. So that just makes it a 2x squared. Negative 9x minus negative 6x. So that would be negative 9x plus 6x, which ends up being a negative 3x. And 2 minus 1, of course, ends up being 1. So that's all you have to do for something like that. You could also be dividing, adding, multiplying. You've got all of the 4 main operations there. Any restrictions in the domain only comes up when you're dealing with division. All right, so this is just a regular old polynomial. There are no restrictions in the domain at all. So I'm just going to write a little side note that the domain is all reals. With something like this, you have to exclude whatever would make the denominator 0. That's the only domain restriction that could come up with any of these. All right, let's do number 7. Number 7 is f composed with g. So remember that means you're taking function g and you're plugging it into function f. So basically, I have my function f, but in replace of any x that pops up, you're going to put this entire function. Okay, so instead of this x and instead of this x, I'm going to replace those x's with 1 minus 6x. All right, so 2x squared becomes 2 times 1 minus 6x squared. Next term, minus 9x becomes minus 9 times 1 minus 6x. And then plus 2 just stays the same because there's no x. So there's nothing to change there. So it looks like that initially, and then you square, you combine like terms, you get everything as simplified up as you possibly can. So order operations say I take care of this exponent first. So when I square the 1 minus 6x, I have 1 times 1, 1 times negative 6x, and then another 1 times negative 6x, so that ends up being a negative 12x, and negative 6x times negative 6x is a positive 36x squared. All right, so I do that first. Okay, next thing is you're going to take care of multiplication, which is really just distributing this 2 and distributing this negative 9. So when I distribute the 2, I get that, and then distribute the negative 9. Okay, all that's left to do in order of operations is the addition and subtraction, and what that means is we're going to combine like terms. All right, so make sure it ends up back in standard form. So the x squared goes first, and there's just one of those. Then the x, I have a negative 24x and a positive 54x, which would be a positive 30x. And for my constants, positive 2, negative 9, positive 2. So this ends up with a negative 5.